Hi, welcome to another video on a time study test for another fence panel build in our version 2.0 build rack for Fence Genius. I previously did a video that went kind of into depth on different things like how to, it was another time study video, but it went into how to set up the settings in the software. And I also did things like I actually timed how long it took to bring the material in. This time I have the material in here. I'm not going to waste your time on that. I'm just going to add the time right now to the top of the screen for bringing the material in. In this video, I'm going to do less narrating. I will still go through my fence board supply and defect orient, and I will still defect orient on my raw materials. I realize that in the field, most guys and girls don't do that in production. They may do it a little bit, but they don't do it religiously like I do. But to me, with Fence Genius, one of the things that we really want to do is to increase the quality using the existing supply chain that we already have access to. And one of the things that's included in that, in my opinion anyway, is I look at every fence panel as an opportunity to have two fence board rips. Sometimes it's only one, depending on the way things work out. But we're all used to ripping the last board. But I prefer to rip the first board also if I can. And that gives me two opportunities to use a defective edge. Now, if my fence board supply is just so good that I don't have any waney edge boards, then I would probably skip that. But if it's that good, that might mean that they, at the mill level, are actually passing over material that could otherwise be used for rips. Anyway, so at this point, let's get started. I wanted to show you around real quick at what we're building. We're going to do, just like in, I'm linking the previous video right here on the screen to see if you want to watch the longer video that narrates kind of how to do the settings and all that. And it has to do with this other fence panel style with more of a vertical lattice. It had 3 rails, 3 trim, and a cap. This panel is going to have 2 rails, 2 trim, and a cap. And I'm choosing to build a panel that has a significant elevation change. Not only does it have a significant elevation change, but it also, the bottom of the panel does not stay parallel with the top. And again, the reason I'm doing that is because I'm showing you how you can use the software to flow through the terrain. You may be stair-stepping through the terrain. You may have a flat top and a diverging bottom. But this is showing you how you can flow through the terrain and let the bottom of the panel take up the hips and the valleys. And in that, I will show you that the fence boards hang down on the bottom of the panel, and when you're done building, you rip them off with a worm drive. Anyway, that said, let's take a quick look at the bill of materials for this panel. I'm going to be, again, doing the same panel as I did on the last build. The rack will have some different settings. I will go to panel 11 because that's the panel we're going to build. And in panel 11, you can see the cap, the trim, and the rails that we need. And then you can see that we have 17 5.5-inch boards. And then the end boards on either end are 2.857 inches, whatever that is. Anyway, if you're using automation, you can get that, but otherwise, you're not worried about it. You'll also notice, though, down here that it says I need 96-inch long 1x6s at this end of the panel. And that's because if you go back and you look at the panel, it is going up this grade, and the next incremental length that I have in my inventory list is 96. So the software doesn't have an option to look for another. So if I go here, though, to set fence optimization, I call this board stretching. And you can see the video on board stretching right here. This has to do with letting the software automatically let the fence board slide up within the covered the covered rail and trim area. So it's basically letting it slide up where you don't see it. So if I check that and I then calculate savings, you can see here that it provides this savings, and I'll go ahead and apply it. And now you can see the actual 3 boards at the end of the panel that are affected. And if I look up underneath there, I can see where those 3 boards are sliding up on the bottom. Now if I go back to the bill of materials and I take a look at those boards, the system has now replaced those boards with 72-inch boards. Then you would save money. It would help you optimize better the raw materials. Anyway, that said, let's go to the pre-manufacturing workflow and let's take a look at getting started here. So I'm going to go in, and again, on this job, I am building panel number 11. So I'm going to go to run 3, and I'm going to go to panel number 11. So at this point, I've got my materials, I've got my saws set, and I'm ready to get started. So I will get this out of the way and we will start the clock. Okay, so let's start. So the first thing, -6 right here, 0 on the top. I look at my rail, I slide it to the right. I have dust collection, but I'm not using it just because it's too loud. I mark the top. Now I say next. I hook the corner that's closest to the fence, 89 15/16. I set this saw for the -6 because I told the system I'm using 2 saws. I cut it. I put it aside. I say next. Next is trim. When I put the trim down, I look for a good face. As soon as I see a good face, I put it up. Everything stayed black, so I don't need to change anything. I roll it. I put T. I roll it back. I slide it to the left. If I had a stop system, I would have it set, but I don't have a stop system. So I mark 89 15/16 again, of course. Makes perfect sense. Now this one's going on this right saw. It, of course, didn't change either. Put that in the rack. I say next. First thing I see is it's blinking at me to go to -9. So I'm on -9. Look at my rail. Looks like a good rail. If I had a defect, I would like to be using that bottom corner as a defect because this is a bottom rail, but I don't have a defect. I actually like to look for defects to use as much as I can. Okay, so I say next. I'm on the right end of it now. This one I have to move to -9. By the way, if I made a mistake and messed up a cut, I would see it when I try. Generally, I would always see it when I try to put it in my build rack. 90 and 9/16. That's a different measurement than the other because it is a different slope. So I cut that. As I eye my cut mark, I like to look right through here, right along the edge of my blade. I put it aside. I say next. The trim, of course, nothing has changed on my settings. I look for a good side. I put it up. I cut it. I roll it. I say bottom. I roll it back. I slide it. I say next. 90 and 9/16. Right there. And again, you may have some equipment that's faster to use, but I'm just using basic compound miter saws. Okay, so now I'm going to do the cap. It's yelling at me to change my settings to 0 there and -6 up top. It's because I like to cut caps laying flat. Cap needs to be a perfect piece of material, 4 square edge. I'm going to cut near the end. I'm going to label it right here, C, because that's going to face down and be covered. Slide it to the left. Say next. I need to set this saw. And again, this 2-saw system is more beneficial when you're cutting fence boards and doing some other things, because once you set your saw, it stays that way for a number of them. I measure along this length, 89 and 15/16. Okay. I look through along the edge of my blade with one eye closed. I cut it. Okay, so this is my cap. I set it right here. So I'm done with that panel cutting. Now I'm going to go to pre-assemble panels. And this screen is going to be on this touch screen, but it's also going to be over here. Now remember, I need to go to run number 3, panel 11, just because I'm just doing this one to explain. So now it's showing me over here what my settings are. So now I need to do my settings for my clamps. So this build is only going to require 2 clamps. So this one will just live in the middle. That one there is going to be high, so I need my step stool to be able to see it. So 78 and 13/16. $78 and 13/16. Bottom one is 13 and 7/16. 13 and 7/16. 69 and 13/16. I may need it. Set that in the middle. 69 and 13/16. By the way, we're going to be doing an update to the software where if it's a top, you'll be able to read on the bottom of it. So you won't need the step stool, but that's coming. The bottom left is 0. That one's already set to 0. And then my distance apart is 80 and 15/16. And that's to this leading edge. Tighten that down. So my clamps are all open. All right, so I'm set up. My build clamps are in the right place. First thing I'm going to do is build my top rail and cap. Now, as always, the label goes to the left as I'm facing the rack. I've got it right here. Here's my cap. I put the label to the left, facing down, because it's going to get covered. And right tool, right place, right time. I'm going to put this on with framing nails. Okay. So I'm going to put it up in the rack here. And I will clamp it on this end. All right. I'll put the bottom rail in. Again, the label goes to the left. I always adjust to my right as I clamp. And I am ready to build. So now I can I'm going to take the time to look at my fence boards. I know most people don't do this, but I just want to do this to make sure I'm doing as much as I can to increase the quality of the panel I'm building using the fence boards that I have. So there's a good rip for another panel. That is going to be a rip candidate for a panel that has a need for a wide rip. So I'm going to swap it out. And I remember from the bill of materials, just because I looked at it, that I needed a 2 15/16 inch rip to begin with. So I've got these 3.5. I've got one that's got kind of a bad edge. I'll use it. And that way I'm getting better yield out of my material. So those are going to go right there. Those are my rips. These boards are good to build with. Right here, first thing I'm going to do, pull out my sliding saw, engage the pneumatic clamp, I'll put it at 2 7/8. It's just a rough number. Put that away. Right tool, right place, right time. I assemble my boards with a staple gun and I put round head nails in the trim. I have that piece of waney area right there, but you're not going to see it. My first board is against the stop. Now I can just start building. Now most guys are faster at this than I am, obviously. Now you can see they're hanging down, and that's because I have the ability to trim them off after I build the panel. And that's something that is pretty hard to do if you're just working on site. You would have to hang them up above and then trim them off and then do your cap. All right, so now I'm on my laser. I'm going to take a quick look at where I'm at. Yep, I'm going to be fine to come on in with it. As far as plumb goes, I'm a little bit out, so I'm going to gain it right here. I'm going to incrementally gain a little bit. All right, so now I'm going to do my panel, my last rip. 3.5. Like I said, I have dust collection, I'm just not using it because of the video. So now I can install these. All right. So now it's time for the trim. Top trim. I put the label to the left and up. Again, I will use a round head nail on my trim. When I put my trim up, I put it against the stop. That's the trim stop right there it's hitting. Now for the bottom, label left. Facing in, I got to get down here and I've got to eye this one in because I can't see it. So I get it against the trim stop. Now I go down here, put in this end. All right, panel's done. Now I got to take this off and I've got to trim it. But first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and remove the clamp. I'll remove the panel now. All right, now at this point I slide it out. Let me add another minute to the time, and that's the time that it takes me to slide it out, throw it on the stack, and then I'll add another minute to the time, actually a half a minute. Let me put a half a minute for running the saw down the length of it to cut those off. And then my panel's done. Now, I hope you can see that based on the time that you can do this in your own production environment. You can be a contractor that's got his own fabrication work pod. I happen to be in my garage right now, It's Saturday morning, everybody else is still asleep. So I figured I'd come out here and do this. You could do the same. On a rainy day, you could be building. On a sunny day, you could take the day off and go with your family. This is what Fence Genius can do to make the work-life balance better for a lot of you. It's also here to make it to where, as a contractor, you could pay a fabricator to fabricate your panels for you for jobs that you just can't get into your schedule because you're too booked. This gives you more bandwidth. Then you just concentrate on setting posts, getting the measurements, and installing the panels. Now, we have repeatedly documented the fact that these take about 3 minutes a panel for a 3-man crew to show up at the site, carry them out there, hang them, nail them off, and have the post cut to height using the iOS app. So you'll be in and off the job site quicker. Your customer will be less impacted by you coming and going, and you'll do less damage to their landscaping in the process. The other last thing I want to point out is that you can pre-finish to whatever color before you even build them. So if you have a shop that has 5 or 10 production pods in it, you could literally have different stain lines right there. You can have your employees go from one job to the next with the click of a mouse. When you're installing, all you're doing is bringing a cordless nail gun and a cordless saw. You're not rolling out compressors, you're not loading up materials, you're simply taking the panels off and installing them. There's a lot of labor savings in a lot of different ways when you go into prefabrication. Plus, if you follow my methods where I like to do 2 rips, your panels are always balanced. You've always got a similar rip on either end. And when you're doing a lattice style, that's really important. When you're doing the panel like this, it's marginally important. People will notice it over time. They may not notice it immediately, but they may notice it longer term when they start seeing their backyard more and they're starting to recognize that the panels are balanced. Set a new standard. Try using Fence Genius. Try growing with us and learning how to use the system. Use the web app to design and to build. Use the iOS app as an estimating tool. Anyway, thank you and happy fence building.